Hi folks, it's David Ostriker here in Carmiel on a sunny February 23rd. We're at Pasha Tetzaveh and Pasha Zachor, and middle of next week we have Purim, the holiday of Purim. So much to cover and so much to deal with. So let's move on. Last week I learned from Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, the former chief rabbi of Britain, that first of all there's such a thing as called a behavioral economist, two sciences that are not really science, and there's a fellow named Dan Ariely who did a series of experiments in what is known as the IKEA effect. What is the IKEA effect? A sense of being lost in a Swedish store? No, it could be. What it is the increased value of something that you make yourself. That is to say, if you go to IKEA and buy a bookshelf, flat packed, bring it home, you didn't design it, you didn't create it, you simply followed the directions and put it together, and yet there's a pride of creation, a pride of ownership in it. Pasha Tetzaveh continues with the theme of last week's Parsha Truma, the building of the Mishkan. Until this moment, the Jews have really been a product of the miracles that God did for them, the 10 plagues, the splitting of the sea, the destruction of Egyptians, food and water in the wilderness, etc. And now God turns the tables on them, and he tells them, I want you to build a house for me. Not that it will contain me, but it'll be a place where we can have communion, where we can relate to one another more closely. And so the obvious question is, why did God do it this way? He could have done it himself. Bang, there's a Mishkan for you. But he wanted them to do it. It's the IKEA effect. What you do with your hands has greater value. And it's proven over and over and over. People produce things and they're asked what is the value of it, and they'll say X. And then if they ask people who did not build it, what's the value of it, they'll say 20% of X. What's the difference? It's mine. I built it with my hands. Comes back to a theme we've talked about before. So now we're in the midst of Pasha Tetzaveh. One should note that the entire creation of the universe by God was dealt with in half of Parsha Bereshis. We're now entering the building of the Mishkan, which will take us roughly, I think it's five full Parshiot. Literally 10 times. The Torah gives 10 times the length to the building of the Mishkan than it gave to the creation of the whole universe. Why? Because of the significance of this moment, this vehicle in which the infinite and finite can relate. This moment in the desert of revelation with God. And it continues on the Temple Mount when the first and second Beis Mikdash stood as well. And they're all products of our building, some more stressful and some less stressful. But it's very, very important, I think, that we always have in mind that we have a responsibility in this relationship. A bris, a covenant, right, is a two-way street. God has expectations of us, we have expectations of God. Not really related, but required, is a mention of Pasha Zachor. Pasha Zachor is the only Torah reading that there is a biblical commandment for us to hear. And most people hold that that commandment really applies to all Jews, men, women, everybody. Right? So if you can, please get to shul this week. And what is Pasha Zachor? Pasha Zachor is a statement that you should not fail to remember Amalek. Right? Don't forget. Right? Why? Because Amalek really went to war with Israel, not because of us as individuals, but because we represented God in this world. Some of the hatred that exists towards Jews exists because our very existence is a statement of the conscience of the world. Not that we're always live up to that. In fact, maybe a lot of the time we don't. But the rest of the world expects us to, and they are very uncomfortable. Nobody wants a conscience. It's a very, it can be a very debilitating thing for many people. Pasha Zachor reminds us of Amalek, which was a people who were anti-conscience. They were people who believed that there was no direction in this world, that everything was a toss of the dice, right? And that we had no relationship to the universe other than of the moment being a victim of it, really. They were the opposite of a people who believed in the Almighty. And they could not exist in that world. It's, the old Western, there ain't room for the two of us in this world. And so the end of Amalek is really part of the Messianic world as well when the time comes. There are those who say Amalek will be able to abandon his status when the time comes and survive. Others say no, that Amalek will perish in the Messianic world. So we're reminded this week, and the reminder is not just about Amalek. The reminder really is about memory itself. Jews have become, in their existence, an element of memory itself. Our stories, our history, really are very much the history of much of the civilized world. And it's very important for us not to forget what we have been through. We know where we came from, and God willing, we know where we're going. I probably won't be speaking to you before Purim. So Purim is a day of tremendous celebration, of victory over darkness, over Haman the Agagite, a descendant directly of Amalek. It's a story set in ancient Persia. You'll read it for yourself. I'm just going to ask you to think about a couple of questions around Purim. Okay? There's a moment in Purim where the Jews are definitely condemned to be destroyed. And Mordechai comes to Esther and says, you have to go to the king, to the emperor, Achashverosh, and you must say to him, save our people. She says, I can't do it. He killed his last wife for disobeying. If he doesn't call me to the throne room, I won't survive. And Mordechai says to her, if you do not do this thing, the Jews will continue to survive, but our house will be cursed. Why did he ask her to do this if the Jews are going to survive? Question one. Question two. When Haman is destroyed, there's still an edict to destroy the Jews. So it's very natural for Esther and Mordechai to appeal to the emperor, retract the edict. And they do. But the emperor says, no, I cannot retract the edict. I'm infallible. If I make an edict, a royal edict, it stays. Mordechai says, okay, I accept that. But make a counter edict that gives us the right to defend ourselves. What's that about? How are the Jews going to defend themselves? What skills do they have against the might of the emperor's forces and the forces of Amalek and Agagites? And then the last moments of the story. The war happens, and in 24 hours, the Jews kill 75,000 of the enemy militia. How did they do that? Remember, this is an age prior to guns. Anybody who's ever had the experience knows that, fighting, hand-to-hand fighting, is very difficult. And killing somebody is almost unimaginable. So how did these people go about killing 3,000 of their enemy per hour for 24 hours straight? I'm not going to answer those questions, but I want you to answer them and think about them. And maybe we'll discuss them next week. I want to wish you a good Shabbos, a Shabbos of rest and contemplation, a Shabbos of remembering. We all have a great deal to remember, of Zachor, of memory. And especially a Freiliche, a happy Purim, that you should enjoy all the gifts that God has given us. Good Shabbos. Oh, one more very important thing. Many guys at universities and ladies at universities are in the midst of exam week. You should be blessed with the success of your learning and your efforts with good grades and good exams. Shabbat Shalom.